to another episode of Prodigy Search Presents. I'm Mark Rush Jr., partner at Prodigy Search. Today it is my sincere pleasure to welcome a dear friend of Prodigy's, Josh Rooney. Josh, thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Great to be here.
So Josh serves as the Chief Revenue Officer for the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum and is responsible for all revenue generation initiatives, which we'll talk about during our interview today, including ticketing, sponsorship, and new public and private ticketed events. And in terms of his story, I really like the background. Josh and I have got to know each other over the years. Brokered and produced 34 stadium concerts with Chesney, Taylor Swift, Brad Paisley, at NFL and MLB stadiums and arenas, ballparks. Also, I love this part of it too, because we can dive into it at some point. Several special projects for the National Baseball Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and various, I think more than a dozen Hall of Fames at NFL and MLB teams. Yeah. So the Packers, the Steelers, the Cardinals, etc. And I'll date you, Josh, back in the day, RFK Stadium, some work for the Nationals and DC United earlier in your career. So a lot of unique career stops along the way. And I tell you that a lot of people probably wouldn't have heard or assumed CRO job at the LA Coliseum exists for USC, but it does. And so why don't that be the first question we jump into is, let the audience understand your current role as CRO as a Coliseum. What does that entail? What's your day-to-day? What's your bigger picture goals and aspirations?
Yeah. Well, the Coliseum will be 100 years old, celebration for the centennial to actually kick off this year. So a venue steeped in history, 2 Super Bowls, 2 Olympics, soon to be a 3rd. This venue fell into disrepair, and the University of Southern California came along in 2013 and took over the venue and made the necessary repairs. $350 million in repairs and renovations. So they put a big investment into the building. They took it over. That was progressive of them. And they needed somebody to come in and really understand how they could harness revenue, how they could use the venue, how they could offset their costs of operating it on an annual basis. And they had the Rams for 4 years, 4 seasons, came in and played, and they actually got an extra season because there were some delays for construction with SoFi Stadium. And so extra 4th year, generating a lot of revenue through that. But what comes after the Rams? So I came on board to be what comes after the Rams, to bring in concerts, special events, to utilize the venue in unique and new ways to try to generate some money.
Well, one of the things you talked about there, and I want to get into the torch in a few minutes because that's obviously been out there, and you and I talked about that in recent weeks. But let's go back and rewind to the modernization of the Coliseum, and in terms of what during the process leading up to you taking the job and then ultimately taking the job. What did you notice? What did you and your colleagues notice in terms of the upgrades, and maybe balance that with, hey, there's the history, there's the integrity of the venue, and also we need to upgrade X, Y, and Z. Like, talk to me about what the modernization included, if you wouldn't mind, but also the balancing act.
Yeah, I think Don Barnum, architect of DLR, did a really great job with the overall design of the venue. They had to, it's a national landmark, so they had to work around the, parameters of that. So, it was amazing what they were able to accomplish, given that they were working under those parameters. But Hathaway came in and did the construction. It was 18 months, and what a great 18 months and turnaround, great success story. Really to take a venue that had been, opened in 1923 and modernize it, for the 21st century. The rooftop deck, 3 levels of suites, club seats, a new concourse with concessions. Really, in addition to that, 77,000 plus new seats. So every seat in the venue is new. So in a lot of ways, on the outside, it has that classic look, and they had to retain that. But on the inside, it's all new. I mean, if you were to take a photograph, you would say, well, what new arena or, stadium is that? Just so many new upgrades to really make it modern. At one time we had those that were 33 seats, wide. And if you need to get up and get a beer in the middle of the game, you got to get 17 people up next to you so that you can get down the aisle. So, we don't think that down aisles and the upgrades of down aisles are necessarily all that interesting, but they really are. And they really come back to, the experience for the consumer that Had to remove the concrete there, put in new down aisles. Just a massive undertaking. And, the first thing I noticed about the renovation is I stepped on a nail. So I'm walking through, what is now the club, the Galen Club on the fourth floor of the new Scholarship Tower, and I stepped right on a nail. But, I saw the potential when I came in and looked at the venue and the history, the location, the metro stops. There was just so much really to take in, and I was really pleased to come on board, and I really felt like I could be a strong advocate for the building and really have some vision on how to utilize it.
It's a tough balancing act, and I didn't even think about the historical landmark part, right? Wrigley and Fenway and those old school venues have gone through different renovations with seating or concourses, but then there's the other aspect that you got to deal with, which is fascinating. I hadn't thought about that prior to me asking that question. But it's also competitive, right? I mean, Josh, we talked about this over the years. That landscape, I mean, in terms of you and your job trying to generate revenue for the Coliseum and bring events and concerts and soccer and all those, they have options in LA, turns out, right? They have 2 or 3 of every sport. So they have therefore 2 or 3 of every venue. They don't need to go to the Coliseum. So kudos to you and your team for accomplishing what you have in just a short window since the modernization has kind of been underway.
Yeah, with SoFi coming on board, that's all that anyone wanted to talk about in the last 2.5 years that I've been here is, the new shiny object out there in Inglewood. And I think that's great, and there's a place for that. This is a big market. I came into this market dead cold. I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I knew that we had to find a unique opportunity or proposition for promoters or event producers. What can we do to be different? And fortunately, like I mentioned with the metro and the proximity to downtown and the parking, we are different in a lot of ways than the Rose Bowl or, SoFi. So understanding the place of the venue in the market, and then from there, understanding, well, what opportunities are out there. And with the Torch, we really felt like there was an opportunity to do an outdoor general admission venue that could go up to 10,000 in capacity. And again, have all of those amenities, the amenities of a stadium that has bathrooms and concession stands and gates and parking and metro stops, and really embrace that and understand that there was a niche in the marketplace that we could create, and we could go out and present as a unique proposition. Um, when U2 rolls into town, Kenny Chesney, the Rolling Stones, they have 3 options, so you've got to do all that you can to get into the game, to present yourself. There are a number of reasons why an artist might play one venue over another. Oftentimes it comes down to availability, but those kinds of opportunities come few and far between. You got to really figure out how to fill the rest of your schedule. And I really felt like that we could be successful by producing or hosting a smaller events at a higher volume. So let's go out there and let's drive 40, shows at 10,000 people. Let's get a sponsor to put on top of that. Let's generate that food and beverage. Let's get these events in here and let's do 40 of those over a season. I really felt like a higher volume of smaller events is where we could succeed, and that's the track that we're on. Now, in addition to that, we're still hosting big shows. We've got Ramstein that's coming up, as you know, and there's another one that's coming up that we'll announce in September. So really pleased on all fronts, but coming into the market and understanding that, there's a lot of options. Yeah, promoters have a lot of options and a lot of leverage.
We're not relying solely on the Coliseum. There's the Torch venue, and there's also Festival Park. Can you maybe elaborate on both of those? And again, I've read, and the information's out there. You can Google it. There's a lot on the various sites about the Torch and about Festival Park. Talk about those two.
Yeah, so when the NFL came back to the Coliseum, our perimeter was extended. It had to be done because for security purposes. So we gained some property, the venue did, in that kind of land grab there to extend the perimeter. So when I came on board, the first thing you notice about the Coliseum is its iconic arches, the peristyle, as we refer to it, with its torch. And out front there, it was kind of a cool venue, but it was narrow and it had a lot of complications. We bring in promoters to take a look at it, and they said, well, we like this, but we just don't know how to use it. We need you to show us how we would do a show. And so we had to take the steps, about a year's worth of research and development to understand what upgrades could be made. And so we removed the fence, and we were able to get that capacity up to 10,000, and we were able to make a free-flowing venue that people could come in and out of, be right out in front of our venue, not inside the bowl, but out in front. And we purchased a stage, and we invested in the infrastructure so we could be more turnkey. So the promoters could say, hey, this is great. You know what? What's your available date? And instead of asking us, well, who do we call for staging? Who do we call for sound and lights? So really making it more turnkey for the torch. Festival Park is kind of an extension of the torch. So you have, festivals that come in and want to utilize Expo Park. Expo Park is the entity that in which the Coliseum and Banc of California Stadium sit in, and that is operated by the state. There are some grassy areas there, some green spaces, and festival promoters like to come in and bring shows that will do up to 50,000 people a day. And they like for them to be able to walk through Banc of California Stadium out into a green space and then into the Coliseum and, kind of move around. And that's a day festival, footprint. And so, what I've found is that we're having a conversation as the Coliseum with a festival promoter, Banc of California is having a conversation, Expo Park said, I just said, you know what, let's get all together. Let's work this out. Let's understand what the expenses are. What is the footprint? And let's go out together and present that as a united front. And fortunately, Ryan Northcott over at, Banc of California Stadium really, felt that was a great opportunity for him. Because so many promoters would come in and say, well, this is great, Ryan, but what about the Coliseum? So to be able to combine all of the properties together and really present that to a promoter, make it much easier for them to come in and understand how to utilize the space, and then also the expenses related to it. We were seeking to get to a point where we, all sat down together, even as competitors. I mean, let's be honest here. Banc of California is a competitor. They do concerts at 22,000. They do a lot of concerts there. So to sit down with a competitor and say, let's come up with a plan that we can work through together, we'll be stronger together, and let's do 4 or 5 of these big, festivals a year instead of doing 1 or 2. And that was the intent. Yeah, it's been successful so far.
But you and I talked about this over the years too. It's fascinating that post Rams, like you said, and prior to there being activity at Torch Festival Park or inside the Coliseum, you have how many USC football games per year, right? It's I don't know, is it 6 or 8 or I don't know, whatever the magic number is. It's not a lot, right?
Yeah, it varies between 6 and 8.
So it's a ghost town otherwise, or was past tense, was a ghost town otherwise.
So I had a lot of experience with that, Mark. Started in 2005, 2006. Understanding that there were a lot of new purpose-built NFL football stadiums and a lot of new purpose-built Major League Baseball stadiums. Prior to that, for example, in Pittsburgh, you'd have the Pirates and you'd have the Steelers playing in Old Three River Stadium. Now they have their own venues, and those venues, like for the Steelers, have 8 regular season, football games. So, what do you do the rest of the year? How do you generate revenue? So I was familiar with that many years ago, that there was an opportunity to bring concerts back to the big stadiums. You may remember in the 90s, there was the Pink Floyd, there was the Who that got back together. Grateful Dead was touring during stadiums. And so there was a bit of a cycle in the 90s, but that dried up. And
why is that, Josh? Why did the NFL and the MLB, not the league, why did those stadiums and ballparks either back away or not pursue it as aggressive? What happened there? What was a
couple of things? It was about the overall experience for the consumer. I think they recognized that the technology at the time maybe wasn't great. I will say that those shows in the 90s were good. I did go to those, but What really happened is that Live Nation and AEG, those are the tour promoters. They started to, take that inventory and put it into their own venues. So they were venue conflicted. They're doing all their new amphitheaters that they built, along the East and West Coast. So, they were filling, and instead of doing one night at a stadium, they were doing 2, 3, 4, 5 nights at Jimmy Buffett in Cincinnati, right? So let's do that at our amphitheater, and let's, even though for some of those artists, the audience is duplicated. Some people go all 5 nights to Jimmy Buffett in Cincinnati because they love it. But I think that's exactly what happened is that, Live Nation being a tour promoter came in and said, let's fill and let's program and populate all of our own venues instead of, doing a show at Three River Stadium or, wherever it may be. So that's the reason that kind of went away. So we use that, by the way, that same metric that I just gave you, which is like, if Kenny Chesney could do 2 nights in an amphitheater, and the amphitheater is about 25,000, then you would imagine that we could get to 45, 50 in a stadium easy, right? Because there's probably some duplication there.
Yeah.
So that was the model. And, with Kenny came along a very, very dedicated audience. Country music audience is very dedicated to their artists. And then, of course, it's a younger artist that likes to have a couple of beers at the show. So, if you're paying a lot for the artist and you're putting it out there, you always have that ancillary revenue of that beer for which to help offset any, or increase your revenue. So, we used to say, Mark, that we would sell 5 NFL halftimes worth of beer in one Kenny Chesney show.
How about that? You need to have more Kenny Chesney shows.
That's some pretty good beer sales, huh?
So,
and Bush was at it.
You mentioned the technology, right? So that's got to be audio, the acoustics. I imagine some of the stadiums and ballparks would say, but frankly, I think the other thing that you've always educated me on too is the hesitation that these teams, or maybe in USC's case, the school, they don't want it damaging their field, right, or their ballpark. They don't want the band on the infield or on the pitcher's mound, or they don't want them damaging the end zone, right? I mean, that's maybe we move past that as an industry, I guess.
We have, Mark. We have. There are so many new technologies. There's this K2 stage that David Niven and Cleave Industries came up with. It's an aluminum stage. I used it in Cleveland when I did a Brad Paisley show for the Cleveland Indians, and the very same scenario. Hey, we did, we did Jimmy Buffett here in '95, and destroyed the field, and we lost in the playoffs, and everybody blamed the outfield, and that we didn't make it into the World Series because of the damage to the field from the, Jimmy Buffett show. So, in 1995, they were using concrete Jersey barriers, those big highway barriers to actually offset and ballast the stage. Those kinds of things don't happen anymore. And that, of course, would cause giant ruts. I was poised and ready. We had about 6 days total for which to load in and load out the Brad Paisley show at Progressive Field in Cleveland. I stood in the left field line. We opened the door to the field as soon as the players ran off, and we went out there. And the thing about these K2 aluminum stages is that instead of heavy duty forklifts or heavy duty stake body trucks, which are heavy to begin with, some of the pieces of the stage can actually be carried out by stagehands because it's so lightweight. So, that's just one example of how the technology's changed. Now, also, of course, the surface, you have the TerraTrax and other material that you put down in the field to protect it. And I think just more and more of these events having taken place, there's more knowledge out there about how to protect the field. There's better protocols, and there's some great companies out there like Brown United and others that, do a great job protecting the fields and setting up the stages. And, I just think technology's come a long way. Sound, audio, staging, that's all really allowed to do this much faster than, it might take 2 weeks to set up a Grateful Dead show, in 1990. Now it takes, 7 days. You could probably shave it down to 6, in and out. So yeah, there's speed, there's efficiency, there's safety, overall protection of the field. I mean, I've been in circumstances where we've unfortunately done some damage. I was at AT&T Ballpark with the San Francisco Giants, and we did a Kenny Chesney show, and a stick body truck slid off of the terra track and the steer wheel went right into the center field sprinkler box. Now, sprinkler box inside of it, it's concrete and had all the, I don't know, had all the sprinkler heads and things inside of it. And that truck just totally smashed that in the middle of the outfield. But the Giants were so great about that. They were promoting this show under Giants Enterprises, and we got through it. But things happen.
I've always heard good things about Giant Enterprises, which has been around for longer than most would expect, and and a few other MLB and NFL teams do a good job of bringing soccer and lacrosse as much as they bring concerts and other live events. I mean, talk to me. I mean, are there any Giants Enterprises a good example? Are there any other MLB and NFL teams that either historically or present day are doing a better job at using it when they're not there?
Yeah, there are. Giants Enterprises, Peter Gallagher, I think Sarah Hunt's now there. They're doing a great job there. They do all kinds of, they do college football games at AT&T Park. They really do a great job of utilizing that venue. But the Patriots, Dan Murphy, just fantastic. Really started the country music festival there. It was the New England Country Music Festival is how we started that with Kenny. Kenny will do 2 nights there every year. He either opens or closes his tour annually at Gillette, and it's just turned into a tremendous market. You have 9 states to market to when you're in New England. You're the New England Patriots, so it's just tremendous. So the Detroit Lions, really great at understanding how to utilize the Detroit Lions in Ford Field. Ford Field is really kind of a larger arena, so you can take some risks. You can do some shows that may not sell 45, 50,000. You could do some smaller shows in there, and so very unique. They do a great job. So those are some examples of some organizations that are very proactive and progressive and have been for a long time.
It's fascinating. I hadn't thought about that until a few recent work trips over the years. I remember went to Minnesota and visited the Vikings stadium, and there was a monster truck set up in the field. I didn't see one 50-yard line. I didn't see one goalpost, but I did see the monster trucks and the dirt hills. And so it's fascinating to me. And a friend of mine yesterday reminded me of the baseball ballparks that have Topgolf setups in them, or historically have had them. I mean, you like that ingenuity. You just have to. I mean, baseball is difficult because you have 80+ home games, but football, not so much. You have some freedom and flexibility there. So
you do, and take a look at this example. The Rolling Stones will play at Heinz Field in Pittsburgh in October. That's right in the middle of football season. Now, we used to say, hey, when we get to August, we get to late August, we're done here. We're done with these stadium shows at NFL football stadiums, because then we're in the preseason, we're into regular season, and you don't want to affect the playing surface. But hey, look, when the Rolling Stones come calling, you figure it out. So you can get a field, you can strip a field, you can grade it, you can get it installed and then painted. You can get all that done in about 3.5, 4 days. So if you've got the time and the team's away, you can do the Rolling Stones right in front of, right in the middle of an NFL football season. Amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
One of the things you talked about the scarcity of events or activity when there's certain sports and whoever's home field it is. What about NASCAR, right? So or motorsports in general, right? The tracks across the country that whether it's regular NASCAR, NHRA, I mean literally any motorsports that are out there. You're talking a couple of major events per year. Maybe 2 big. And I know they do other things throughout the year, but some of these they've won 1 or 2 Super Bowls per year, and that's it, right? So what's your vision for how motorsports entities, their tracks, their venues can do what USC and the Coliseum want to do?
Yeah, many years ago, I looked at tracks, and tracks have been challenged traditionally for which to do concerts in a traditional sense. So when you think about an NFL football stadium, it's just a big arena with no roof. Okay, some of them have roofs, but it's a big arena. So you put the stage on one end and you just play like you would in an arena show. You need some delay towers and a big stage, but it's kind of the same thing. When you're looking at a racetrack, that's so wide, right? I mean, some of these tracks are 2 miles of the front stretch. You think about how wide that is. You can't really play that way to stands at a racetrack. Now, the Stones and many other shows have done this in the 80s, sometimes in the 90s, but it really fell out of favor for a number of reasons we just talked about. The amphitheaters, the NFL football stadiums, Major League Baseball. So, unfortunately, the racetracks have fallen out of favor to become, tour stops for shows. So what could they be utilized for? I think what's unique about those venues is that they're quite large and that they have many of them overnight camping facilities. So to me, what a great footprint for which to put day festivals so that you come in, you have a full day's worth of experience, you have multiple stages, you're moving around, you're not seated in your traditional seat, reserved seat, looking at the stage, you're moving around all day like you're at Coachella or Stagecoach, one of these major festivals. And then at night, you have the facilities for which to house the RVs or to put up, tents or other things and, charge additional for that. So I think that, racetracks, and I know that I've been talking to a couple of tracks. I've got a friend who was the president of one. This is on their radar that they need to understand what more can they do with their venue. And I think concerts could be a great way to get started. I think there are many other, there's hybrid motorsports events. I just saw one recently. I think it was the Atlanta Motor Speedway did a Supercross, and you're seeing more and more of that. So these venues have to become more and more progressive. They've got to get out ahead of it. They've got to advocate for themselves, and sometimes they need to take their own risks. So they need to go to a Kenny Chesney and say, "Here's $2.5 million, come play my venue." So they're actually self-promoting, self-advocating. So.
Well, to your point, some of the locations of some of these motorsports tracks are in desirable locations in terms of other touring acts and how they're being routed through the southeast or I mean, they're not in bad locations. If you're going to a few different locations throughout Texas or Florida, well, there's a few arenas that are or ballparks or stadiums that are the must play anyway. So open up your track, in that same window. And you don't need to do Steelers mid-season, mid-bye week type of thing, but you can make that work if there's touring acts that are coming through. There's again southeast, southwest. I mean, there's great tracks in Phoenix, great tracks in Florida as well. And there's up Nashville. I mean, and listen, that you and I could probably talk about the opportunities that exist in Nashville, right? So
that was the one I was thinking of actually. Yeah,
there,
as the president of the track there, and he and I worked together at events DC. But I think that you have to understand what is the value, what is the proposition of a racetrack, and again, having a big footprint, having overnight camping facilities, being able to really, create a large footprint for a festival. I think that's unique. It's not just another tour stop for Kenny Chesney at an NFL football stadium. I think these are more festival stops and something that could be created as an annuity. So that was the big thing with the Patriots all the way back to 2005 or six. Let's create an annuity. Let's make it the New England Country Music Festival, no matter who headlines it, right? Is it Jason Aldean? Is it Kenny? Who's coming in here to do this? And the same thing could be done for the racetracks. Let's create an annuity. Let's do this. Let's get out ahead of this. It's going to be on the same weekend or around the same time every year, and let's do it annually, and then from there, just grow it. So yeah.
So I think I buried the lead a little bit here on this one, Josh. Maybe if nothing else, a better way to no better way to close our conversation today than the LA Olympics, right? We're all looking forward to the LA Olympics, and whether you're still in LA in 2028 or not, I'd love to hear your perspective on how truly special it will be for the city, for the venue, which is the Coliseum itself, and all parties and venues involved. I mean, 1984 was a long time ago, too long ago. So what should we expect? What are your thoughts leading up? 7 years is going to be here before you know it, I guess, right? So talk about the Olympics.
Yeah, I see the infrastructure every day. Every time I come in and out of LAX, all the people movers they're putting in just to understand, how they're going to get those crowds in and out of, the airport, and then, out into Inglewood at SoFi, and then of course at, it's not only just the Coliseum, it's all of USC's campus. There's a baseball field there they're actually going to knock down, and they're going to put up a swimming facility. So with the Coliseum, This will be the third Olympics. This will be the first venue to ever host three Olympics. We'll have the track and field, the traditional track and field, events take place there. I just, you sometimes just have to take a moment of pause just to understand, all the history and all the people that have participated in the Olympics at the Coliseum in Los Angeles, and the new history that'll be made, and how to tie it all together. And it's going to be very special for us, for the entire city. I know that the Olympic Committee, and I know that here at Los Angeles, everything will be done that can be done to make it a smooth and great experience for consumers to come in. I think that it's really going to bring back a lot of pride to the Olympics. I think it's going to bring back a lot of interest. I think that LA will have an opportunity. I know that they're thinking this, to really demonstrate, that it is an entertainment. It is the focal point of entertainment, not only in the nation, but in the world, and really to demonstrate that in front of the world, with a world audience. I can't think of a better opportunity really to showcase the venue than to bring back the Olympics. The Olympics, of course, is in 2026, but prior to that, as I mentioned, we have a centennial to celebrate. So that's really what's on my radar at the moment. The 100 years of history of the building, and the World Series that was played there, the two Super Bowls, the two Olympics, Evel Knievel and his jump over Greyhound buses. Just a great bit of history to celebrate there, and also to, I hate to say it, monetize, from the aspect of having sponsorship and also attracting events. We've been very successful in in our outreach to artists to say to them, look, we'd love to have you come back and play. You sold out this venue in the 80s. We'd love to have you come back. And this is the reason why. We're going to tie it into a centennial celebration. And, artists really gravitate to having a platform besides themselves. Hey, it's artist A coming back. That's great. But, it's part of the centennial. And that gives them another platform. And, the artist wants to have that kind of support. And we've said to these shows, look, we're going to do all that we can. We're going to support you with all the history, and we're going to support you by really, making you part of the centennial celebration. So we're going to get that kicked off actually in September of this year, and we're going to run that all the way to December of 23. The providence we had to do that is that in November of 1921 was the groundbreaking. So our first artist that'll get the whole centennial celebration started will be a groundbreaking performance. Run that all the way to 23. And you never really want to be pigeonholed in a 1 year to celebrate a 100th anniversary, because an artist could decide, I'm not going to tour. I'm going to take this year. So we gave ourselves about 2.5 years to kind of stretch that centennial out. And that's really what's foremost on my mind, is how to populate and how to, continue to attract top artists to come in and play. And it's just a tremendous platform for us. So.
That's great. There's tremendous amount of opportunity, short term and long term. There's just a lot that's going to happen. It's exciting.
There's a lot that's going to happen. The venue's ready, and we're going to continue to innovate. We're looking to do an amphitheater, 6,000 seat reserve seat venue that will rival the Greek, and we have the plans for that. The Torch will be successful, Festival Park. And then your traditional shows, if you do your full bowl shows that the stadium has been so successful with over the years. And we look forward to having Rammstein come in and really bring the music back to the venue.
That's great. Josh, listen, it's been a pleasure, following your career, following the growth and the success you've had at USC, particularly with the Coliseum, and what lies ahead for the future. Really appreciate your time today. Can't thank you enough for joining us. And listen, it was a fun and insightful conversation, but also we could probably do this for another half an hour. I'm not sure the listeners would want to listen for a full hour, but your pleasure to have you, Josh. Thank you for your time.
Too many stories, Mark. There's too many.
Well, thank you, my friend. Be well. Take care.
You too. Thanks.